So I want to say good morning, good afternoon, good evening, right, to everyone who has joined us. And if you are watching this, later at a different time, those things apply to you as well. Assalamu alaikum, peace be upon everyone. And I want to welcome you, right, to the sixth session of the Africana Muslim and Genealogies of White Supremacy Sawyer Seminar for the Interdisciplinary Study of Blackness and Muslimness. The seminar is led by myself and Professor Samer Ali and Murad Idris. The seminar focuses on the racialized figure of the Africana Muslim, i.e. Muslims from Africa and its diasporas. It aims to address the way the Africana Muslim has been hypervisible in the theory and practice of racism since the days of Columbus, yet has been largely invisible in scholarship on critical race studies, white supremacy, and Middle East studies. The seminar brings together leading scholars, thinkers, and activists to reconceptualize the study of the African and the Muslim and recenter the Africana Muslim beyond the cracks of traditional disciplines and narratives. Our goal is to trace the intersection of race and religion in the production and reproduction of white supremacy in both theory and praxis. The seminar is supported by the Mellon Foundation and housed at our home institution, the University of Michigan, whose origins are a land grant from the Anishinaabe, including the Odawa, Ojibwe, Potawatomi, and Wyandotte. Our university stands, like almost all property in the United States, on lands obtained in unconscionable ways from indigenous peoples. Knowing where we are changes neither the past nor the present. However, through scholarship and pedagogy, we work to create a future in which the past is thoroughly understood and the present supports human flourishing and justice while enacting an ethic of care and compassion. Today's session is the second installment of the Africana Muslim and the Fierce Urgency of Now. In 1963, when Martin Luther King Jr. invoked the fierce urgency of now, he warned that, quote, "There is a such thing as being too late. There is no time for apathy or complacency. This is a time for vigorous and positive action," unquote. Taking this as a point of departure, this session, session 6, brings together scholars whose academic and advocacy work has been shaped by and response to present-day crises, such as the counterrevolution in Sudan, the genocide in Palestine, and the fascist censorship of those who speak on either. Each of the session's keynote lectures thinks through how the Africana Muslims' longue durée under surveillance, exile, occupation, and threat intensifies the urgency of now. Rooted in on-the-ground realities, these lectures open new dimensions in the contemporary production of race and religion and suggest how we might analyze, understand, and act in the present. Today, we're excited to have Yasser Qous as our second keynote speaker. Yasser Qous is a postgraduate student pursuing a master's in the Department of History and Civilization at l'École des Hautes Études et Sciences Sociales, Paris. His research interests are in Palestine's social history with a focus on the historical construction of the Afro-Palestinian community in Jerusalem. Yasser is a Palestinian community leader in the Old City whose organizational skills and guiding values inspire others to follow in his footsteps. In 2006, with a group of friends, he revived the African Community Center in the Old City after it had been shut down for several years during the Second Palestinian Intifada. Yasser was born and raised in the Old City of Jerusalem as a son of the African community. And without further ado, I will turn it over to our speaker, Yasser Qous.
First of all, would like to thank you all for hosting me in order to abord the question of the African community. I don't know if we have to signify the presence of the community as an African community, but there is a lot of discussion about the signification of the people of the African that they are living in Jerusalem. So I will start with the people. I would like to make an introduction about the people of West Africa, because this is what I can describe the community that they are living inside the old city of Jerusalem. People of West African origin living in the old city of Jerusalem make up one of the most marginalized communities in the city in terms of their society, of their socio-economic history. They used to present one of the biggest ethnic groups in Jerusalem before the 1948, the creation of the State of Israel. In the Old City, West African nationals have mostly been categorized and custodians as guardians of holy sites and schools. However, their social economic profile is far more complex. They are involved in many different kinds of economic activities and are settled in both the urban centers and rural villages. The peak of their migration took place during the colonial period in Africa, and the majority of them have now been permanently settled for over a century. They interact with the other ethnic groups on a daily basis and share many common socioeconomic concerns with their neighbors due to economical and political durableness in the city. However, they also face unique problems with regard to their historical background and status. The issue of settlement raises many questions about when and how these different West African communities came to settle in Jerusalem and also vis-a-vis their relation with the local Arab community. I will attempt to reconstruct their main journey of migration, a rather difficult task because of the limited sources. While سجلات المحكمة الشرعية, the record of the Islamic Waqf, archives tend to emphasize the lack of a strong relationship between the Black African Muslim community and the Jerusalem West African community. We'll take up the challenge and recount their story from the perspective of active networking and ongoing ethnic history. Until the beginning of the 19th century, many West African immigrants were totally or partially assimilated into local Arab groups, or more or less recognized as indigenous group. During the 19th, 20th century, this assimilation process was slowed down by magnitude of migration patterns. The West African, however, remained clearly distinctive in spite of many cultural changes. Today, they are still largely regarded as foreigners, irrespective of the duration of their stay in Palestine, and are mostly known and labeled under generic terms such as Abid, which means slaves, Takarir, and Sudanese. However, 2 points are important here. First, the status of African communities is far from being identical in all areas of Palestine. It varies according to the social fabric of each locality and to the specific history of the African in each area. And I would like to say a little bit that we are focusing about the African Muslim that they are living inside the old city, but we are not talking about all the Africans in the Palestinian society. So because we have different communities that they are located by, as an example, in Jericho, in Negev, and in the West Bank. So we are not talking about this history. We are just talking about the history of the people of Jerusalem. Second, the regional characteristic influences and cohesion of the different African subgroup, their identity, affiliation, and their interaction with local community. While other Palestinians perceive them as a single entity, West African descendants are far from constituting a homogeneous group. They are characterized by their diversity in terms of ethnic, culture, and linguistic background, socioeconomic status, political affiliation during of stay in the area, and degree of assimilation to the core Arab culture. The diversity and complexity of the different African grouping and subgrouping raises the question of their internal cohesion vis-a-vis the others. They do not react equally to their consideration by outsiders as forming one ethnic group, and they do not all agree on the benefit of unifying themselves to form an active supra-ethnic group, which mobilizes itself to acquire more rights, including political ones. It seems very difficult to describe the West African, known as Takarni in the Old City, without referring to Black African Muslim communities in general, since they share a common story. The West African in the Old City represent the Black African Muslim forces point east is in a long process of migration from west to east, Hijaz, throughout Africa and Egypt. To clarify the situation, allow me to start with the brief this community. West African community, the term West African includes the following 8 ethnic groups: Fulani, Hausa, Kanuri, also Yasser Qous, Borno, Zagawa, Salamat, Barko, Kanambo, and Bolala. Each group belong to a different African language family: Niger, Orphidian, Fulfilled, Afro-Asiatic, Hausa, and Nilo-Saharan, according to Greenberg classification. Each group forms a large and dispersed entity resulting from complex historical process of mixing and integration that will not be discussed in this detail in this situation. West Africans are spread throughout Jerusalem, including in its western sector, with a concentration in one area in particular, Ala Din Road, adjacent to Abab al-Nazir, one of the main gates to the Al-Aqsa Mosque compound. The case of the West African community in Jerusalem is particularly revealing. It's a community where many people from different backgrounds speak a large number of languages. This variety is, however, much stronger in the first generation of migrants. By the second generation, Muwalladin, which means that they have been born from Arab women, a more uniform dimension prevailed. Indeed, even if there still remain migrants speaking Hausa, Fulani, or other languages, Arabic are by far the dominant language, just as Islam is largely the faith of the community. The majority of Arabic-speaking tribes that settle in the community, the Fulani, Hausa, Zagawa, Borno, Salamat, and Kanombo, offer a wide variety of physical characteristics, which, with the African trait, often most dominant. However, they are all consider themselves Arab. Hosni Shaheen, an African writer who established a physical link between the presence of Islam on the African continent and the Arab world, faces the Arab origin of West African in Jerusalem. He explained they are Takruri migrants from East and West Africa, from Niger, Sudan, France, modern-day Mali, Chad, and Senegal. The Hausa are estimated to be the biggest group among all the Western African population in Jerusalem. This group is believed to be the oldest and largest Hausa diaspora in Palestine. The Kanuri, Borno, Hausa, Bargo, Salamat, Zagawa, Ekanambo are also can be found in the quarter and are believed to be among the earliest dwellers. Also can be found a clan named Bulala, which claims Bilal as a eponymous ancestor. Bilalian genealogies thus respond differently to the need to claim it as a prestigious ancestor, since the latter is not only Muslim but also African. In the specific case of the Bulala clan, the genealogy has yet another dimension. It also brought to fill the void of an-nasab, affiliation, because it's a deported population, and to erase the server origin in question, since they are no longer descended from any slave, but from a companion of the Prophet. Similarly, West African Jerusalem highlight their Arab origin to the determinant of their African origin. Still, there are tribes of free men, a general phenomenon of assimilation also observed in the speech of my uncle, Al-Hajj Jibreen Bulchana. Throughout his life, he has always said that those who came to Jerusalem were free. We are not slaves, was a point he made clear. Similarly, Al-Hajj Muhammad Jidda, the former Muhtar, the chief of the community in Jerusalem, also insisted that he was born in Chad of a pure Arab family who arrived several generations ago from the Hijaz and bears the same name as the famous Saudi city, Jeddah. The purpose of highlighting the point is to showcase the ascendance their search for political legitimacy or spiritual power, and their attachment to a cultural sphere considered more rewarding. But these genealogies hardly call into question the non-Arab past of the people concerned. While many West African Jerusalem say they are of Arab regions or of Arab origin, this does not prevent them from preserving their language and their own tradition, just like the Fulani and Hausa. Also, the causes of the rejection of the Africanism are complex, but they are, of course, linked to the shame or societal origin and the inferior social status imposed on Black after the abolition of slavery. The use of the genealogies or stories can prove the quality of their Arabism, which is therefore immediately observed within the Arab world itself. The Muslims of the Black continent, of course, fully assume their African identity without resorting to any Arab genealogy. We do not, therefore, pretend by the preceding example to sum up the history of the Muslim Africa in a simple quest for Arabism. However, the extent of the causes in time as well as in space still deserve attention. The takarir, or takruri, the signification of this term. The term takruri, or takrur, was widely used in the Middle East and the Hijaz to refer to Black Muslims from West Africa and the Chad Basin, in relation to the medieval Muslim kingdom of West Africa. This appellation had a religious connotation linked with pilgrimage. However, since their settlement, its use as an ethnic label has begun to disappear, replaced by the far more common term Fullata or Fulani. Contrarily, we do not notice the use of the term Takruri for Hausa self-ascription in the Old City. We notice instead the wide use of the term Fullata, formerly a Kanuri term referring to the Borno Fulani. Until the beginning of the 20th century, the term Fullata was mainly associated with Fulani religious sheikhs or other notables of West African origin. At the end of the 19th century, the term Fullata became associated with main religious and political migrants to Jerusalem, led by Fulani leaders and by many other West Africans. Thus, it became broadly applied to all Nigerian and West African immigrants and pilgrims. Both the term Takruri and Fullata conveys negative or ambiguous overtones stressing poverty, illiteracy, religious fanaticism, and wandering in the street, petty trades, low-class jobs, menial works, and so forth. For some authors, these stereotypes reflect the heritage of a slave-owning society where manual work has always been performed by other slaves or low-status people. For others, these stereotypes reflect a class division stemming from the introduction of a capitalist economy. There is evidence that the Fulani Takruri presence in Jerusalem can be dated in terms of centuries. However, the early history of the West African Jerusalem requires further investigation. The West African presence in the Old City proceeded throughout the Mamluk era, but few documents are available for this early period. We just notice from the Sigillat of Al-Aqsa Mosque that there were some of the Africans that they are living in Jerusalem. The majority of the West African migrants arrived at the end of the Ottoman era and during the period of the British mandate. Economic factors searching for new opportunity, but also pilgrimage and hijrah, compressed the central motives for their immigration. The last decade of the 19th century and the first few decades of the 20th century represent the turning point of West African large-scale immigration. During the end of the Ottoman period, the first Sheikh and Mukhtar of the African community, Al-Hajj Muhammad Truma al-Siddiq, who was born in the city of Kano, district of Kaffa, arrived in the Holy Land. West Africans were deemed important caretakers of the mosque and held keys to the holy site. According to Arif al-Arif, History of Jerusalem, المفصل في تاريخ القدس, when Gideon visited the city, the African guard refused to stand aside to allow the foreigners' entry to the mosque area. In order to solve the embarrassing quandary, the city Ottoman leaders had the guard jailed until the notable made his rounds in 1855. Meanwhile, Eric Back highlighted the point that Jerusalem was part of the West African Tijani pilgrims network, even before the colonial era. Some of these networks were established via the Hajj routes, as according during Umar Tal pilgrimage in the first half of the 19th century. Tal left his homeland of Pototoro in 1826, arriving in Mecca in 1828, where he stayed for several years. He then traveled back via Jerusalem and Cairo and finally arrived in Sokoto, where he spent 5 years. While in Jerusalem, he gained a reputation for piety and learning was acknowledged by those around him. It is said he led the prayer in the Dome of the Rock, cured the son of an Ottoman sultan from madness in Syria, and astonished scholars in Cairo by his vast erudition. The Hijra, political migration, is considered as a major event and crossroads and a line in the usually drawn to distinguish between pre-Hijra and post-Hijra migrants. During the British Mandate period, the 1917-1947, the migration of the West African can be attributed to the following main religious, political, and economic factors. The conquest of Palestine by General Edmund Allenby during the First World War in the Sinai Desert, West African would then have been conscripted by the British Army as workers to lay railways and build infrastructure. When these workers returned to their homes in Central and West Africa, they told their families and friends the wonder they had experienced in the Holy City. According to Muhammad Jeddah, son of Adam, early childhood memories of the economic status at his father's homeland, Chad, are still vivid. He told his father that he wanted to leave Jerusalem and return to Chad, but his father cooled his temper. There is enough ignorance and poverty in Chad. I don't want to add more ignorance and poverty. Stay and get educated and then go so you can contribute in the building of the country. Between 1935 until 1948, groups of Chadian, Senegalese, Sudanese, and Nigerians made their way to Jerusalem as part of an extended pilgrimage on the anti-Islam holy sites that includes Mecca and Medina as part of Hajj circuit. Al-Hajj Jeddah was born in Jamina, modern-day Chad, and wandered throughout his childhood to different locations in West Africa, where he acquired both Islamic education and knowledge of English and French. His Hajj route crossed through Sudan, Ethiopia, and Yemen, and he explained here, I was born in Jamina, but at that time they called it Forlami. At the age of 10, I went to a Beriberi speaking settlement in Nigeria. There I began to study the Quran. I also traveled to Jakawa and Diyarawa. Afterwards, we went to a village called Mirakarawa, part of which was French and part of which was English. After 5 years, we returned to N'Djamena and stayed there for 1 year. Then my uncle Amina and I traveled overland to Sudan, just the two of us. We started off by foot, walking some during the daily hours. Yes, there were horses in those days, but not on that route. Sometimes we did ride on donkeys until we reached Sudan. It took us 2 months like this. I was about 15 years old. We eventually arrived to High Selassie town. Then we were placed in boat to take us to Yemen. The king in Yemen at that time was Imam Yahya. Then from Yemen, we walked to Mecca. After performing the Hajj, we went to Medina and then set off or Jerusalem. When we reached Palestine, we settled in Jerusalem. There were already people from Sudan and Nigeria, and this is whom we stay in the world. There were a lot of Hausa too who came here as kind of pilgrimage. Our brother gave us a place to stay. We also detect the same religious factory in the testimony of Zohra al-Qadi, also of African heritage. Her father is from Sudan and explained her late husband, Muhammad al-Qadi, came to Jerusalem in the mid 40s after making the pilgrimage to Mecca. He had planned to pray to Al-Aqsa, stay for a while, and go home. But as his wife put it, that was not in the stars. And Qadi, who also had a family back in his homeland, Nigeria, married Zohra and settled down in the quarter. Meanwhile, Al-Hajj Muhammad Jeddah explained the economic and political situation of Jerusalem during the period of his arrival in the mid-20s. When I arrived, there was a big war going on between Germany and England, but it didn't affect us much. There was plenty of food, there was money, and the markets were full. The big powers brought us a large market. In Arif al-Arif, 1948, the history of the Nakba, West Africans were recorded as being part of the Arab Liberation Army and fought against the British mandate and the Zionist project in Palestine. Tariq al-Afriqi, a Libyan Nigerian, was a leader of Palestinian military group in the Battle of Jabal al-Mukabbir. West Africans also participated in the Battle of Qubbat Rahel at the entrance of Bethlehem. General Al-Arif Sayyid, General Riley, the chief international observer, held a meeting on August 22, 1948, attended by Colonel Abdullah Tal of Jordanian Army, Colonel Ahmad Aziz of the Egyptian Volunteers, Commander Tariq al-Afriqi of the Palestinian, and Moshe Dayan of the Israeli Army. He attended the International Control Board with General Riley and General Lanston. It was agreed to add a new area of Jabal of Mukabbir to the area that the High Commissioner had placed under the supervision of the International Red Cross. In many cases, these different factors, pilgrims joining the Mahdi army, or hijrah and economic migration, have been mentioned. Migration patterns varied according to each group, but members of the different groups joined together on different occasions, especially in the case of Adam Jeddah Hijrah. The length of migration and settlement explain the diversity of West African community in the old city and their various degrees of integration. There was nonetheless a continuous link between the former and later migrants. The old center established by the first generation helped in the settlement of the more recent migrants. Pilgrims visited established relatives and many decided to settle in Jerusalem when joining their relatives on their way to or from Mecca. The diversity of the migration pattern does not necessarily imply that West African migrants were disconnected. Another important feature of most West African communities is their ongoing networks with far established relatives living either in West Africa or in the Hijaz. The demographic weight of the West African population in Jerusalem is extremely difficult to assess for a number of reasons. Former migrants assimilated into local groups, or many have become detribalized. Others were annexed about being recognized as slaves. The Islamic Waqf records, this group was estimated at 74% in 1929. By 1948, the West African population was estimated to be 3,000 people. The higher number of West African immigrants was found in the old city of Jerusalem. There is evidence, however, that the two words, Ribat, Ala ad-Din al-Mansuri, and Mansouri within Jerusalem were given to West African probably during the beginning of the British mandate, around 1929, by the Islamic Waqf authorities to serve as their residents. The West African are concentrated in a specific quarter just beyond the Arch of Bab el-Majlis Street, an area now referred by its inhabitants as the African Quarter, Al-Jalia al-Afriqiya. Outsiders often refer to it by the less sensitive name as the Habs al-Abid, the prison of the slaves. The two sides of the African Quarter, one on each side of the main thoroughfare just before the Aqsa Mosque compound, date back to the Mamluk era. One of its sections was built in 1267 by Prince Ala ad-Din. The other was constructed in 1282 by Sultan Qalawun as a hotel for pilgrims as they performed their religious obligation. The two buildings originally housed noted exiled by the Mamluks and their madrasas. Toward the end of the Ottoman Empire, the Ribat building were used as a prison, which explained the reason it was called Habs al-Ribat and Habs al-Dam. First generation of West African in Jerusalem confess they still have connection with other Black African community, especially the Jericho community, which whom they maintain a relationship, visiting for ceremonies, intermarriage, exchange of news, etc. The foundation of the early settlements is portrayed as an epic undertaking by the extraordinary, courageous people endowed with magical powers, asrar. Some sheikhs, like Faki Mu'min, become mythically heroes performing miracles. The development of the community identity, judging from Muhammad Jadda, son of Amina, only memories of the African quarter where he grew up, his father replicated many Western African customs in their new home in Jerusalem. By the time a group of Africans from Senegal, Chad, Sudan, and Nigeria had shaped themselves into what Mahmoud called a big family. Our life there and our relation were very close. We considered each other brother, although there was no blood relation between us. If somebody died, then everyone would come of condolences. And if there is one expensive, like a wedding, then everybody pay. On Fridays, we would usually have lunch together. Somebody would go to all the houses and gather money from everyone, no matter how much, and they would go to the market, and three or four people would prepare lunch, while the rest went to work or pray at the mosque, and then everyone would meet together. Sometimes others in the neighborhood would come and join. After lunch, we would stay for a religious discussion, and they would tell us about Prophet Muhammad and the Quran. Then we would go to the mosque and pray the Asr prayer. After the prayer, we would sit and talk politics. In 1935, the structure of solidarity had been developed and institutionalized among the community. This was the year they established their first social and cultural institution, the Sudanese Club, An-Nadi al-Sudani, was headed by Abdel Jalil Idris, along with the African Charity, Jam'iyyat al-Afariqa. But the development didn't affect the more archaic structure still in place. The position of the Mukhtar was responsible for all kinds of things. He approves marriage. If someone does something involving the authorities, he is informed. If someone wants to travel, the Mukhtar help him. In Jerusalem, the West African community is implicitly associated with the term slave, abid, and an Arabic-speaking population of African origin who lives as pariahs, socially enclosed in the old city of Jerusalem, who some view as descendants of slaves. According to others, they are African settled over time in the country. They are also viewed as being foreigners. These negative stereotypes influenced some residents of the old city who penned a letter to the British High Commissioner demanding that he deport the West African from Jerusalem. Some ignorant people discriminate against Black because of their skin color. several citizens of Jerusalem were against their residence in the holy city. Muhammad Quttani, Hassan al-Qassas, Muhammad Hijazi, and Muhammad al-Bideri, who wrote a letter to the British High Commission demanding the deportation of Africans from Jerusalem. Indeed, they say they do not want strangers in Jerusalem. Muhammad Jiddah also tells of a rare childhood visit to the house of a friend with his own 8-member family crammed into one room. He was when he walked in the door, the mother turned off on his friend. How dare you bring a slave to our house? Her insult and choice of the word abid, slave, was immediately thrown out before him. It was not the first or the last time that this West African would feel the sting of the Middle Eastern prejudice that continues to color related adjective when describing the group. Some Palestinians still refer to this with dark skin as abid, literally translated as slaves. Racial slurs against black are oddly frequent in a society that has experienced its own share of prejudice and discrimination at home and abroad. I would like to talk a little bit about what happened after 1967, and after that, the engagement of the Palestinian in the Palestinian national movement. As I don't know if you know that the first Palestinian woman prisoner, it was Fatmi Barnawi, which is a Nigerian that she spent 10 years in jail. She was the first woman that had been imprisoned after 1967 because of her engagement with the resistance against the occupation. Other two members, Mahmoud and Ali Jaddi, that they spent nearly 20 years in prison after the war in 1967. During the first Intifada, and I think during all the history of struggle in Palestine, in 1982, we have a lot of martyrs that they have been killed in Lebanon. They have been I think one of the martyrs have been interviewed by the one of the members of the Black Panthers, and he write an article about the engagement of the Palestinian African with the Palestinian resistance. During the first Intifada, most of the young people in the community they have been in prison. By myself, I had been in prison for 4 years when I was 14 years old, and after that. I went another time to the prison, but was a general atmosphere that most of the Palestinians that in my age they have been engaged in the Palestinian movement or Palestinian resistance movement during the second Intifada. During the second Intifada, we have the first martyr of Jerusalem, which his name is Osama Jaddi. He was a young 20 years old when he was shot by the Israeli forces at Jerusalem. We have other members that they are still in prison till now. We, as the second generation, we consider ourselves that we are Palestinians with African roots. So, all above all, the racism that exists in the Palestinian society, we think that we are marginalized. We are not in the we have been part of the national movement, but we are marginalized with this also national movement. So the contribution of the African society, I think, in the Palestinian resistance, it was so high the contribution. But till now, we can say that most of the people that in Palestine look at the African or the color, or the black skin color, that they are slaves, without trying to understand that there are different people that they are. I can stop here.
Amazing. Thank you so much for that lecture, and just so much to think with. I wanted to encourage everyone to put questions in the Q&A function if you have them. And then I will turn it over to Dr. Sawad to ask a question.
Okay.
Yeah, thank you. I wonder if you could maybe speak a little bit to kind of what's happening right now, right? Sort of in terms of both sort of Jerusalem, the old city, but also with the West Bank. Like in terms of, because I'm wondering, like in terms of your point about Fatima Bardanawi, right, and the other people you mentioned, and the role of sort of like Afro-Palestinians in the resistance, right? And so I'm just wondering, like right now, like how would you describe, I guess maybe, right, like the experiences of sort of like Afro-Palestinians right now? Is there anything about being a Palestinian with African roots that makes it distinct, sort of living under occupation? Like, or is it, you know what I mean? Or, like, is there any distinctiveness to that? Or is it sort of a shared experience across, irrespective of whether you're Muslim, Christian, African, not, if you're Palestinian, you're kind of having sort of the same experience, if that makes sense.
I think one of the major problem that we are facing, I think, that there were no social change in the society in parallel with what's happening on the political side. So we have a national movement, but we don't have a social movement that it have been changing all the stereotypes that it have been
Mm.
observed in our society. Most of the, I think I will tell you a little bit story about what is happening with me personally. When we have been starting in order to create the African Community Society, most of the people before they used to call us Habs al-Abid. It was when they pointed at the quarter, they say this is Habs al-Abid. When I think that this was a focal point for us in order to understand that we have to get our rights. We have to get our own signification that whom we are.
Mm.
Because of that, we start in order to work to create a community center that can work with African children, but also with other local children that they are in the city. And within, I think, 3 years, we succeeded in order to change the animation of the place from Habs al-Abid to the African Community Center. I think that this is the change. I think that most of the time, the problem of the society, there are things in the Palestinian society we can't talk about because it's not the moment in order to talk about. Because we don't have our democratic, battle now because we are facing the occupation. So we are putting all the things under the carpet. So there are problems. There are discrimination. Yes, there are discrimination. When you are talking about, let me tell you a story, a little bit story. Before 3 years or 4 years, there were workers that they are coming from North Palestine to Ramallah. You know what they call them? They call them the Thailandese. The Thailandese, the people that they work with, they call them the Thailandese. So we have this kind of discrimination, but which I can consider it as a social discrimination between the people, but they consider themselves that they are the autochthon, the people that the indigenous, and the arrivals, which are the strangers that they are coming from all over Palestine. If you are talking, you are coming from the north. If you are a refugee, if you are other, so you can imagine it's much more worse when you are African, because from the beginning you are a stranger. You are not a Palestinian. You are a stranger. And I face this question approximately daily when I'm here in Paris, because when I identify, like when I participate in demonstration or something like this, most of the people they look at me when I start talking in Arabic and they get shocked and they told me, "Where are you from?" I told them, "I'm from Palestine." Wow, are there Africans in Palestine? Yeah, I told them, sure, there are Africans everywhere. So I think the ignorance and one of the things is the ignorance, but also because this is the relation between the center and the march. And I think this is one of the questions that we have it all the time, that the march that the African or the other communities, they are not in the center. They are in the margin because they consider to be strangers. And the centers are the people that they are indigenous, that they claim that they are indigenous, that they are living since a long time on Palestine. So we have this problem all the time when it comes for the case of marriage. Doesn't work. Doesn't work. It doesn't work with most of the people that will not. They will refuse to give marriage for other people because he's black, and there was a lot of rejection. We have a lot of rejection from families that we consider that they are close to us, that we have been raised together, we have been living together. But when it comes to affiliation, to a nasab, it comes the rejection that no, they are African, no, they are not Palestinian. And for us, it's very clear that we are Palestinian more than the Palestinians. Yeah. Because for me, the Palestinians, it's an idea. Is not to be born in Palestine. It's to believe of the right of the Palestinian. If you believe on the right of the Palestinian, you are a Palestinian. It doesn't matter that you are living in Palestine or you are living in Washington. It doesn't matter. If you believe on the right of the Palestinian, you are a Palestinian. Because you are a human. And this is the case. For me, the question of discrimination, we don't talk about it. We avoid in order to talk about it. So most of the time when there is some of the highlights of this kind of invisible discrimination, most of the mechanism that it used is to defend. No, we are all brothers. We are all Muslims. If we are all brothers and we are all Muslims and we are from why you are practicing discrimination against us? You have to answer about this question. If we have the same base, why you are discriminating me?
Thank you. We had a question from the audience, and they want to thank you for the lecture. And they said that during the pandemic, there was a conversation on Twitter about fundraising for the library in the community center. Are there any developments on this project, and is there still a call for assistance?
I think one of the projects that it have been all the time is, the center of the African community have been renovated. We have two centers. Now we have two centers. We use a place as it's not considered as a kindergarten, but it's after school education. So we are trying to give an opportunity for the children in order to join informal education. So we have a library, we have different kind of activities, and then we give you some of the examples. There is a social workers that you are working with the children because of all the trauma that they are living every day in Palestine. But in parallel, we have such kind of activities in order to introduce the mathematics through circ, or to give the theater in order to give lessons on Arabic. So we are using informal education in order to evaluate, to progress much more the capacity of the children in order to continue their education. One of the problems that we were facing all the time, that most of the youth, they quit their education because of the economical situation of their families. So the idea of the center is to motivate them in order to continue with their higher education. Now we are very proud to say that most of the youth in our community, they go to university, and we have graduated and we have post-graduated people, and we have people that they are in master degrees, and we have people that they have doctor's degree. So we all the time, this is one of the problems that we tried in order to prepare or to collaborate project toward. I think the library is function, and I can't say what you can do for the center because I'm far away. I'm far away from there, but you can try to get contact of with them in order to ask them directly what they are in need now, actually.
Great. Thank you. Dr. Saad, you had another question?
Yes, I do. Sorry, I'm not muted, right? Okay, sorry.
No, we can hear you.
Yeah. Okay. So yeah, I was thinking, so there are two things that came to mind when you were speaking. So the last point you made about um if you believe in the right of the Palestinian, you're a Palestinian. It made me think about kind of if we think about like the Africana person or the Africana Muslim generally. And so this idea that on one hand, there's discrimination that you're facing, right, because you're of African descent, right? And the kind of marginalization, as you put it. Um, and so it sounds like kind of that experience, like embodying that experience, enables this ability to recognize the fissures, right, like in Palestinian society. But also your response to that isn't like, let me prove how, yeah, it's like you open up what it means to be Palestinian, right? Like as opposed to like, okay, so people are sort of pushing us away, but we are Palestinian and we open up. So our sort of the is more expansive. And to me, that seems to be in many ways a kind of a hallmark of like a lot of African and diaspora communities in general. Like there's a discrimination people experience, but like what it means to be Black, what it means Africana, what it means to be whatever, we expand it as opposed to sort of closing it down, right? So that was just a thought that came to my mind when you said that. And then there was a community you talked about, the Bulala clan, you said, right?
Mhm.
That sort of claims descendants from Bilal. And it reminded me of in the United States, after the Honorable Elijah Muhammad, who was led the Nation of Islam, passed away, his son, Rafi Muhammad took over the community, and one of the names the community had for themselves was Bilalians, right? Again, this
Mhm.
idea of Bilal as an ancestor. And so I'm wondering, I'm getting to my question. I'm still thinking a lot, but I'm wondering in
Yeah.
terms of, I guess there are two parts to the question, really. So one is, what do you think, like this idea of a free versus an enslaved genealogy? Like this is something that sort of
Mm.
African diasporic Africans everywhere, this is an issue, right? Like this
Mm.
kind of a shame around having an enslaved genealogy, claims to being free, having a free genealogy. And I guess in the Palestinian context, like where do you think that comes from? So if I think of a US context, I think that comes from kind of like sort of the dominance of white supremacy in the society here, right?
Mm.
And so sort of fighting that makes this tension. Palestine is not the United States, right? So I'm
Mm.
wondering, like, what do you think are the origins or the sources of this kind of tension around not wanting to be from an enslaved background, in that context?
Uh, One of the things that I didn't mention that I studied the history of the slaves of Jerusalem. So in my master's, um, when I tried in order to make my research, I go back to the سجلات المحكمة الشرعية and the records of Awqaf of the court of Jerusalem. What I discovered there that there were this kind of distinction between Takruri and slaves. It was very clear because during to the سجلات المحكمة الشرعية you have to be free, born free, which means if you have been born from a slave, you are a slave. But if you have been born from free, you are free. When I start in order to elaborate about the name of the Takruris, I think in the المحكمة الشرعية report, they start to distinction between people that they came from the land of Islam, where the Islam is the religion, and other that they came from other part of Africa. So they called the people that they came from the Islam land Takruris. All the people. If you go to the المحكمة الشرعية record, you will find that his name is Takruri. though his name is not Takruri, but he comes from Takrur. He comes from Takrur, Takruri. The others, they came from others, and they are slaves. So during to the محكمة الشرعية, people that they came from Takrur, they are free, and they specified, they were very accurate about it. People that they came from Darfur, they are free. People that they came from Horn Africa, they were slaves. So during to these distinction, why this distinction? I think that it was the reaction of the African community of Jerusalem in order to say that we are free. We have been born free. And when I start to search more in the سجلات المحكمة الشرعية, I found that there were a chef for the slaves and chef for the takrurs. So they were a quarter for the slaves, and they were quarter for the African that they are Muslims or they are free. The problem that we never have this kind of connection between both communities, because for us we are far away of the profile of the slaves.
Mhm.
And I think within the first generation, they do the same of the African diaspora. They have been closed on their community. They have been very close to their community in order to, because of that, it was forbidden for foreigners from outside the community in order to come and to be part of this community. I think within the, after, I think during the first intifada on the 18th, 17th, I think, no, I think during the 1972, when they established the African community, the African club, or afterward, I think the community have been start to be open with the society. It have been more open with other Africans in order to interact with other Africans. Before it was very close community because they consider it as ta'ifi. Ta'ifi, it means a community, but it's a small community.
Thank you. We had one question that I believe I answered in the chat asking for the email for the center, which I put the email that is on the website there, which is african1983@gmail.com. So just wanted to get that's it. Okay,
Yes.
great. Wonderful. Wonderful. I had a quick question following up on that one. You talked about how for your generation, it's identifying as Palestinian with African roots, and then also just in terms of what Dr. Swab lifted up as being Palestinian by believing in a free Palestine. I was wondering, there's so much focus on kids in Palestine and Palestinian youth. And so I was wondering, have you noticed any differences or just like notable features in the way that youth in Palestine are talking about their African roots or what Blackness means to them that is, different or a continuation of like the generations before them, or they're putting their own, like, what is it, Gen Z, Gen Alpha kind of take on it.
I will tell you something, Iman, which is much important. You have to think that the African community have been isolated after 1967. We have been isolated, totally isolated. We have no connection with Africans all over the world. I think there were some of the visit. I still remember I was so young in the 18th when Muhammad Ali Tlai, he came to Jerusalem. And he attended a marriage. It was a marriage in the quarter, and I was very happy because this is what was the first time that we met Africans from outside. I give you another indication. For me, as Yasser, it was the first time that I make a contact with an African outside from our community. It was in prison. There was a guy that he came from Gaza, man. It's called Al Carrara in Khan Yunis, that he's African. And we met at a Ramle. And it was the first time for me as Yasser to meet with other African that he's living in the same land, but we never get the opportunity in order to be in contact with each other. The idea, I think, the first intifada, it have liberate us as youth, have been liberate us in order to be much more open with other communities, with other people. And I think the visits of the African diaspora during that period or after that, it opened our perspective about similar or different issues that we share as Africans. And I think that it had been highlighted our African part, because most of the time we consider ourselves that we are simply Palestinians without linking this identity with our, original identity that we are Africans. So what we do with Africa, with the new generation, they create something which is, I think, it's an innovation. They make an Afro dubkin. It's a dance, an Palestinian dance mixed with an African dance, and they have a lot of activities. They are trying in order to keep the both identity, but we don't know a lot about our African identity. We have been disconnected from that, and I think it's because of that we are trying a lot in order to be in contact with other African communities all over the world, in order to see ourselves in the mirror, that we are not simply African, Palestinian, we are also African, that we have things in common with other people in the world.
I just would say that was really powerful for me to hear what you said in terms of because then when we think about, you were saying to being disconnected from other Africans. So first, because it seems like part of what you're describing is sort of a disconnection with other African communities, other Afro-Palestinian communities, right? That disconnection is happening. It seems like in part because of occupation and mobility and that type of thing. And the same as a consequence of that, there's also this disconnection, right, from Africans in Africa elsewhere, right? And so I'm wondering then, do you think then, or would you ask, or do you think that more Africans need to come to Palestine? Because I
Yes.
know they have these things, could you maybe speak to that? Is that what needs to happen as well? Is that part of,
Most of the time, when Mark or other friends, they came to Palestine, and at the end of the meeting, they asked me what you are asking for. I told them, come back. Bring our stories to your society, and bring your story to our society. I think the knowledge is the most important thing, is the key in order to traverse all these borders. For us, when an African or a group come to us in the African community, I tell you the truth. We feel that we are not alone. And in the struggle, we are in need for that, to feel that we are not alone, that there are other people, that they have the same interests, they are thinking about us. And this is, I think, much more important for us than sometimes they expect that I will tell them that we are in need for AIDS, we are in need for, no, we can manage. We can manage. We create our own solidarity things inside the community. We can manage. But the most important thing is to come back. Because of that, I'm always talking about with my friends from Solidarity Group. Don't go to throw stones. I need you to come back to Palestine. I don't want the Israeli to stop you and not to let you go in Palestine because you are my messenger to the world. When you go back, tell your story, what you have been observed during the visit in your community. This is, I think, your engagement for our cause as Africans and our cause as Palestinians. Tell stories. One day, we have been a lecture and with some of the youth in the community, and I asked them, what do you think make us difference? They start to tell me the color of the skin, our ideas, our roots. Yes, that it make us difference. But the most important is our experiences. Our experiences is the most thing that make us different. So I think the visit to Palestine, it will be a focal point in your experience. It will change a lot of things, and it will, because knowledge is a responsibility. You can't ignore it.
Thank you. That was beautiful. Samuel, you have a question?
Yes, thank you. Yasser, I really appreciate, I've just been learning so much. My question sort of follows on the theme of solidarity and this very compelling idea of, you're not alone. Um, One thing that comes to mind is that there are many Palestinians that multiple generations now of Palestinians who have been in exile in West Africa. Senegal, in particular, has a very substantial Palestinian community. And I'm wondering, are there any connections or solidarity? Are there any cultural ties with those Palestinians in West Africa?
Unfortunately, no. The problem of you know, after Oslo Agreement, there were a lot of people that they have been organizing solidarity groups to come to Palestine and to visit Palestine in order to get connection with. The problem that most of the time we can't reach them and they can't reach us. So we have we have the opportunity in order to meet with some of the groups that we develop our relationship with them. But because of the instability of the situation, the political situation, I think it's a little bit complicated in order to do it. Because of that, most of the time I'm thinking we have to be creative. We have to create our links. We don't have you don't have to be physically in Palestine or to meet with people. You can host people from Palestine, discuss, talk. Um, I don't know, organize a musical event, something. It's online, or now it's all you can do it online or something like this. But I think the problem is much more political problem because most of the people they can't come to Palestine. So there are a lot of restrictions. There are a lot of restrictions. There are a lot of friends. I'm living in France. There were a lot of friends from here, from France. They want to go to the community, but they have been forbidden in order to enter to Palestine. So we are not in control of how we can make this kind of contact, but all the time we have to think about alternative.
Thank you. I had a question building on this. So post October 7th and a lot of Black organizing spaces, especially I found on student ones, there was a call, there was like a language and conversation of seeing Palestinians as Black and thinking about and thinking about them as Black, not in the way that you're talking about in terms of recognizing African communities who live in Palestine, but thinking about what the Palestinians are going through as a Black experience in a kind of like, I think in a similar way in which like Malcolm X in the Nation of Islam thought about Blackness, um, in terms of like a particular relationship to colonialism and imperialism. And so I was just wondering, so I guess my question is if one, if what you think about that, has that kind of language or discussion like reached the communities that you're a part of and kind of, yeah, just my, I guess my question is like what are your thoughts on that?
I will tell you something. When I saw them, I saw me. So the blackness is not related to color. It's a statue. It's a statue. So what we can work on it is what Steve Biko is calling for Black consciousness. So we are in need for that. And I think that the youth in our community, they are aware of that. They are very aware because, as I told you before, what happened after 7 October is not to raise Palestine as the major case on the world. It's the Palestinization of the world, which means that everyone see himself in this struggle. He can make a comparison about his situation with what is happening with the Palestinian society. I think also it reminds us about our history, but it had been done with us before. As indigenous, Black, but in a modern way, within its life, it's on camera. But we don't forget what happened with the indigenous Americans and what has happened with the African. I think what has happened after 7 October, it remind us, it bring us all this history of oppression for all what we consider the people of the South. So for me, it's much more that you can see yourself. There is no middle in this struggle. You can see yourself with or against. You have to be very clear. It brings us in our, I'm talking now as a Palestinian, to really identify whom are our allies and whom are our enemies. It's very clear for me that imperialism, Zionism, and Arab leaders, they are our enemies. And all the freedom fighters all over the world, they are our allies. For me, it's very clear. And this is one of the strategic thing that we can see it in all over the world. Because of that, I'm saying we are all Palestinians. We are all Palestinians because to be a Palestinian is not mentioned to be born in Palestine. To be a Palestinian is to have a faith on the equality of this people or the rights of this.
Thank you so much, Yasser, for that. Do any of my colleagues have any more questions, or does the audience say we're about at time now?
I don't have a question, but just I have no questions. I just sort of, I mean, I
Absolutely.
think that was just really, I think you just, yeah, I think it's going to stick with me, and people will be able to watch this later. But I think about this question of like the point you said about how can people be supportive or whatever, and it's like make sure folks know they're not alone, right? Like I think that was really
Mm,
powerful for me. And then this question of like, like the Palestinization of the world, right? And the ways in which
mhm.
I think, yeah, like these kind of imperial forces, like like I'm in America, but this is the same issue, right? It's like these are the same things that we're fighting against. And so I think it's just those 2 points. I just wanted to reiterate that because I thought that was really
Mhm.
powerful how you put that as something for us to kind of carry and take away with us. But yeah, but no more questions, but just thank you so much.
Yeah, virtual round of applause. Thank you so much for joining us. Um,
Thank you.
we have our last lecture of the seminar series on June 30th at noon EST with Nasreen Al-Amin. And you can go to our website, bit.ly Africana Muslim to register for that Zoom webinar. So we hope to see you all there. And Yasser, again, thank you so much for such a beautiful lecture.
You are, thank you. Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you.
Wonderful. All right. Assalamu alaikum, everybody.
Assalamu alaikum.